Well, hello. This video is going to be about an introduction to infrared photography. And you can see here I got three cameras. Two of them should look basically identical because both of them are the same brand and model. Both of these are Nikon D50 cameras. And these are like somewhere around 20 years old. They're 6 megapixels. So, it's older technology, and you can get them inexpensively. I've got no more than $50 to $100 in each one. Figuring, like with the lens and that, you find a good deal. Sometimes you can find one of these cameras that doesn't have very much use on it, because sometimes somebody will get one, whatever, as a gift or whatever, and they used it on vacation a few times and it sat in a closet a long time. But anyway, since we get back to infrared, this one here, I've painted a little red dot on it because I have converted this camera, and I did it myself. I watched a whole bunch of YouTube videos where someone was nice enough to share themselves actually doing the surgery, if you will, on their camera. And it was a similar camera. The one I remember watching the most was for a Nikon D70, which is also 6 megapixels, made about the same year. And when I opened this one up, I saw that there were some differences, but it's really subtle. It's just, there's a different screw here or there. It really wasn't a big deal. And then I've got this other Nikon D50. I have not converted this one yet. I've got a filter I'm going to put in it. So this one's going to be, this one here will be 850 nanometers, I believe it is, which is black and white, and I'll go over all that. So here's an image of what I bought when I got mine. I found these on eBay. You can see that in this case they make one that fits multiple cameras, and there's others as well. And this one here is $590, and then the 720, and mine's $850. They didn't have a picture of it, but it looks the same as this. It's just black. And including shipping, I think I paid about $50 for it. This one here is called full spectrum. So this one, I've removed the internal filter, which removes infrared light and UV light. So now both of those will come through. And then I had this other one here. This is actually a very good camera. It's a Minolta DiMAGE A1, and this is close to 20 years. I don't know exactly how old this one is. This one might be slightly newer. This one here does not have interchangeable lenses. You can't remove the lens. On the D50, obviously, you can take the lens off. So see, I've got a body cap on here. So you can change lenses. And apparently the difference is with this particular type of camera, instead of putting the UV IR filter internally in the camera, they did it with coating on the lens. And it just, which is fine for regular photography. It's a great camera. But when I did infrared, I got what's known as a hot spot. So I wanted to show you that so you can see some of the pitfalls of what happens. Just that it doesn't work with every camera or every lens. Because like with these here, the particular lenses I have work great. But if you buy a newer modern lens, it's possible that it'll have that different coating, actually kind of a better lens in some ways, more expensive possibly, but it doesn't really work as well for infrared. So anyway, we'll get to that. Okay, so we're going to start off with standard picture here I took. Regular camera, no infrared or anything, just a normal picture. And what I did, I put my camera on a tripod, and I tried to take the same picture with each different situation. So I've Of course, right now I've got just a stock camera, just took a picture. And then I'm also going to put an infrared filter on it. I have two different ones. And then I'm going to do the same series of pictures with my full spectrum camera. And then I'll take a picture with the Minolta camera that did not really like infrared. So I should say a little bit about what infrared light is and all that, normal light. So infrared light is just another source of light. It comes from the sun, and some of the light bulbs and stuff we have it as well. But our eyes can't see it. We see just, our normal colors. And as you can see up here in the upper left-hand corner of this software, I'm using this Raw Therapee program, which is a free one. It shows you red, green, and blue. So that's normal. And this camera will have red, green, and blue pixels, and they put it all together and give you a picture. And then it has an internal filter in front of the sensor in the case of the two Nikon cameras. The other one, I guess it's just filtered apparently with the lens, just with a coating on the lens. And that filter, all it does is it passes the light that our eyes see and blocks the infrared light and the ultraviolet light, which the sensor of the camera can see. So that's the whole trick there is when I convert a camera, I remove that internal filter. But thing is, some cameras, if you take a long enough exposure with an infrared filter on it, you will get an image because the cutoff between visible light and infrared light is not absolute. So it lets a small amount of infrared light through. It's just you don't normally see it because the picture is flooded with visible light. So when you put that filter on and block out the visible light, you can get some infrared in. So now here we'll see what happens. You put an infrared filter over the lens of a normal camera. In this case, it's a Nikon D50. And the filter I'm using is called 720 nanometers. Now what that amounts to is visible light that we can see goes from 400 nanometers about, which is down by blue light, all the way up to about 700 nanometers, and these are wavelengths of light. And at the 700 end is your red light, and then green is in the middle. Now, with this camera, let's see, the first picture I showed you, I had a shutter speed, if I remember correctly, it was 1/2000th of a second at f8, and it's on ISO 400. And now this time I had to go all the way to 1/15th of a second to get an image. And this 720 filter that I'm using, this is the common infrared filter where you can get some color. And as you can see, the picture basically looks red, but I'm going to fix that. And if we look up here in the upper left at my histogram, you can see the green and the blue are way over on the left. Hardly any green or blue light got through there, and quite a bit of red light got through. Now, one of the things it took me quite a while to figure out how to do was to find an easy way to adjust white balance so that I could get some good colors. So on this particular software I'm using, this is a free program. It's called Raw Therapee. And the reason I'm using this, I have my camera, the settings set to shoot in RAW as far as quality. So I'm shooting at full size, full 6 megapixel size. And then instead of shooting a JPEG or a TIFF, I'm shooting RAW. And what that means is that it gives you this image that has not yet been processed. Now, in order to view it here, Raw Therapee has done enough processing so that it can show me an image, because if it had nothing, it would just be a black square. And then I would have to bring up the brightness and stuff. But on this one here, to get my white balance, I found there's a very simple little tool. If I go over here to the right, this third icon from the left is called color. I'll click on it. And the first item down here is white balance. And one thing I learned too, there's a little button there, an icon of a button that's like a power button. And you can turn it off and on is the idea. So that way you can make an adjustment and you turn that power off and it'll go back to what it looked like before. So I'm going to go here to pick, and this gives me a little picker on my cursor, and in this case I'm going to go to something white since I'm going for white balance. So this should be normal. I'll go for a cloud, and hey, we've got something that looks completely different. Now the image, all I know is it looks kind of dark, and remember it's not been fully processed. What I'm going to do next, I can do it in this, but I'm used to using a software called GIMP, and it's another free program. So I'm going to do here, I'm going to use Raw Therapee to convert this RAW file into a TIFF file. So I'm going to go down here to this little icon, click it, and it'll save it. So I just got to tell it where I'm going, of course. And I've got a folder up here, stock D50, We'll save it TIFF. It saved that, and then we'll open it up in GIMP. Okay, so I've got it opened up in this GIMP program. Like I say, it's GIMP, and it's supposed to be similar to Photoshop, except it's free. Now, in order to brighten this up and make it easier to see, I can actually see it pretty good here in my room right now, but I don't have that much light on. If I was in a bright room, classroom or something with a lot of lights, it might look very dark. So I'm going to go to the Colors tab and go down to Curves. And this right here is my histogram. So this is all my image. You can see it's all over on the left. And this is where it's dark. Down here on the left side, that's your black area. Way over here is your white. And then in the middle is your midtones. If you notice, there's hardly anything as far as this histogram over on the right hand side towards white, even though the clouds are quite white. So I've clicked on this line and I'm just taking it up to the top, and I'm going to drag it over to the left to where it's almost all the way to this histogram. So I'm on this vertical line here. You can see it got a lot brighter, maybe a little too bright. I'm going to grab here in the middle, and I'm just going to kind of move that gently over to the right there to darken it up some and get it to where the visibility is a bit nicer. So for quick stuff, that's okay. I'm going to click OK. So now things are, even though the colors are odd, right, they're supposed to be. What's happened here is, since I set my white balance, the clouds actually look white for the most part. The ones on the left might be a little funny looking. The trees have kind of turned blue, and if you give them enough exposure, they'll start to turn white as well. And notice my sky, it's kind of a brownish color, and if you give it enough light, it can turn kind of orange. And that's because this filter has blocked out most of the blue light. Now, of course, you look at the trees and you think, well, they could look kind of blue, but It's not way over in the blue because the blue sky is not there. So it's just kind of, the green light is still there, and then the infrared lights brightened it up. So that's what's happened. You know, some of the leaves and stuff here on this plant are starting to turn white. They've had enough light on them. But then what if you want a blue sky? Because this can be done. And what's common, a lot of people do, is they'll swap the red and the blue. And the reason you do that is because a lot of times the sky will turn kind of red when you take an infrared picture. And if you put that red color into blue and then put the blue back into where the red was, you can end up with a blue sky. And of course it's going to change the color of these trees too. And I can do this. I'll go up here to the colors, and I'm going to go way down to components and then channel mixer. And what this does, as you can see here, it might be confusing if you've never seen it, but what it says here, the red channel, so that's your red colors in here. It says red in red is 1.0 or 100%. None of the green image is red, none of the blue image is red. I have the same situation for the other two channels. Green is all green, there's no red in the green, there's no blue in the green. Same with the blue. The blue is all blue, no green, no red. So we're going to change these two. So I'm going to drag this red in red down to 0. Get it about to it. I'll get it close. I've got presets too. I can save them up here. So I may have some saved in there if they didn't get lost. Now I'm bringing the blue in the red channel up to 100. So now I've removed the red from the red channel, and I've got the blue in the red channel. You notice it changed the trees too. They turned kind of pink. So now we want to get the red in the blue channel and try to get some blue in our sky. So I'm going to bring that up here to the 1.0. Close to it, yep, there. And drag the blue down to 0. Okay. So now this isn't 100% blue sky. It all depends on your exposure and how sunny it is and everything. And plus I can play with it some more. But, so now what I've done, I've swapped red and blue. I've got the blue image, as far as the camera is concerned, is now showing in the red. And the red image from the camera is now showing in the blue. And the green I didn't change at all. Now, I can do some stuff here. I'm going to try to make the colors a little brighter. I'm going to go color menu again. I'll go saturation. And what this does, this affects how red your reds are, how blue your blues are, and so on. If I was to drag this way over to the left, it turns into a black and white picture. Your trees start to turn white. If I drag it way over to the right, it was in the center at 1.0. If I drag it way over to the right, all these trees start to turn kind of bright yellow, in this case, bright orange. You can play with it how much you want. You know, you can decide whether it's too much or not enough. So I'll just give it a spot there. And one thing I wanted to point out that I hadn't mentioned before, this little building looking thing here is a covered bridge. And if you remember, in the first picture, it was red. And I think I've got it up here. Here, this is what so this is what it looked like normally. And you can see you had your normal blue sky, a few clouds flowing around. The trees and the plants are green. The leaves over here on this plant in the foreground, some of that's turning a little brown. It's kind of dried out a little bit in the summer heat. I took this picture in early September. We had a real hot summer. So then I'll go back to where I was at. As you can see, the bridge appears to have changed color. And that, from what I can tell, it's because the infrared light is reflecting off of it. Because, you know, one thing that got me was infrared, at least with this filter, is letting through some visible light. And the visible light that it's showing me is mostly red. But the bridge didn't stay red. Now, when I do my other camera, the full spectrum one, I use a variety of filters I'll show you. And sometimes I can get the bridge to stay red and get other things to change colors. So here's, anyway, this is the 720 with the unconverted camera. So it's just a regular old Nikon D50 camera where I haven't done the surgery on it. And I had to make my exposure much longer. It's a bright sunny day. Instead of an exposure of 1/2000th of a second, I had to go all the way to 1/15th of a second. And the next filter I'm going to do is called 950 nanometers. And that one's supposed to be all the way into infrared. As a matter of fact, I'll show you a picture of the filters here. You can't tell it as good on this picture, but when I got my 720 filter, it was the first one I bought. I heard that you could see through it a little. So I'd hold it up to my eye and it just looked black. It was like looking at a lens cap. So I held it up to a light bulb and I could see the light bulb glowing through there. And then if you're in a dark room and you look out through the window into the sunshine outdoors, you can see kind of a reddish glow to it. So it does let some light through. Then the 950 filter, when I do that, I wouldn't see anything. There was infrared light coming through it, but I couldn't see it at all. It looked like I was just looking at a solid black piece of plastic or something. So now we'll go to 950 nanometers with the same stock camera. Okay, so now I've put that 950 nanometer filter on. Same camera. This is the unconverted Nikon D50, just a plain old camera. And my exposure time, I went all the way up to 4 seconds. If you look here, there's your red that this is mostly on. Before, it was going up higher. So it's blocked a lot of light. Plus, I've gone a long way. So I've gone from 1/2000th of a second all the way up to 4 seconds in this case. Now, it is possible to get some color in here. As you can see, I've got some color this thing's showing. But when I white balance it, or if I just desaturate it, remember the saturation tool where you could make the red more red, or just make them all nothing into black and white? That's what normally happens for this. So when you're shooting, if you're shooting anything above 720, if you get up to like an 850 filter or a 950 filter, normally that's a black and white image, and you can get very high contrast. A lot of unusual things happen, so I'll pick the cloud again. So now it's gone to black and white. And in this case here, some of the trees, like the plants up in the front right picture in the foreground, they've got enough light. They're starting to turn white. If you look at the trees back in the background on the other end of the lake, there's they're getting gray, but see this thing, it could have used even more light. And part of that, I noticed there's a shadow down in the middle over the bridge and over the trees right there. So maybe the sun was behind my back. So maybe there was a little bit of a shadow there that affected it. But the thing is, when you're shooting in infrared, especially like with this filter, a lot of light is good. I took this at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and sunset was 8:30. So this is like late afternoon, 3.5 hours before sunset. Still very bright out. Sun was nice and high above all the trees. But, you know, that's one of the things. It takes a lot of light. So we can open this up in GIMP as well, and we'll get something out of this. So you can see it is doable. I had heard that you couldn't use a 950 filter on an unconverted camera. And when I show you it on the converted camera, it's definitely a difference. Okay, so I converted it to a TIFF in Raw Therapee and then opened that up in GIMP. Again, I'm going to go colors down to curves, and I'm going to bring it down. I don't have to drag this as far to the left in this case as I did that last image. That's really brightened it up. And I'm going to bring this mid-tone down just a little. As you see, the sky starts to turn black. You can make the sky go jet black if you want. We'll overdo it there. But the idea, you can get a whole bunch of contrast with this. Real high contrast black and white images. You can see the plants in the foreground now. They're really starting to look white. When I show you the image that I do with the converted camera, all the trees start turning white quick. As a matter of fact, that's sometimes it's hard to avoid. You know, one thing I learned was sometimes I would go out to take a picture, and I wasn't used to thinking of the way something was going to look in infrared. I'm looking with my own eyes. So I would see, say there was a large tree in the foreground and some more trees in the background. And with a normal picture, you could easily see the two separate trees. But in infrared, it just turned all white, so it made it harder to see. Now, sometimes if you get it where one tree, maybe a tree or a bush the leaves are a different color or they're drying out, then maybe you can get it. And then when you do full spectrum with different colored filters, you definitely can. So as you can see here, it is possible with the standard camera that has not been converted to get infrared pictures. Like I say, this one here I did 4 seconds. Really could have got away with more. I might have been better off to go 6 or 8, and maybe better off to have done it at, say, 2 o'clock in the afternoon when the sun was high and no clouds to interfere and cast shadows across things. But I wanted to point out, you know, some of the interesting things about infrared light. The plants reflect a whole bunch of the infrared light. That's why they turn white on you. And apparently it's not the green color that does it. It's something in the leaf. I used to think that it was water in the leaf, but then I found out water tends to absorb infrared light. You can see here the lake, the water mostly looks black. You can see some of the reflections of the trees in the background coming across it, and I think that's just the angle of the sunlight. The sun's behind me, and It's not straight overhead. So sometimes, a lot of pictures I see, that'll just, the water will look jet black. But the sun's at an angle where I was able to get some reflection on it. And then, of course, the sky absorbs a lot of the infrared. And now, since I had the longer exposure, obviously I had to use a tripod, and the wind was blowing a little, so the plant in the foreground is kind of ghosting out, which is fine if that's what you want. But if you were wanting it to not be doing that, then this would be a disadvantage to you. And now you see a picture. It's, boy, what went wrong with this one? This is the picture I took with that Minolta camera that I showed you that did not have interchangeable lenses. And so there's, I'm not sure if it even has an internal filter in it. If it does, apparently there's no way for me to remove it. That particular camera, my understanding is the lens assembly is actually glued to the same assembly that holds the camera sensor. As you can see, of course, it's normal that it was all red because I haven't done any color balance. Then you look here in the middle. This is the hot spot. This one here is one that's showing up real bad. So I think the idea is they have that coating on the lens, and the light kind of goes through the center of the lens easier than it does through the other parts, I guess is the idea. But anyway, you get a hot spot. And I say this doesn't happen with all cameras, but some of them it does. So if you're thinking about doing this, either, putting the lens on an existing camera, a filter over your existing camera, maybe Google your brand name and that, and the model of your camera, and also the lenses itself, because like I said, some cameras that have interchangeable lenses, if you have a real new modern camera, maybe the really high quality lens has coatings that aren't favorable to infrared photography, and an older or cheaper lens maybe works better, which seems kind of counterintuitive, but those lenses weren't designed for infrared. They were designed for normal photography. So anyway, that's something I wanted to show you. Not all cameras play nice with infrared photography. Okay, so now I've got my full spectrum camera on here, and this is with the 720 nanometer filter, so it's the one that can get some color pictures. If you remember, I went with, I think it was 1/2000th of a second with the standard camera that had not been converted. This one here, I went with 1,000th, and when I look over here at my histogram, some of it's, that red's kind of pegged, and that may just be, the clouds are burned white or the trees. So this one here might be slightly overexposed, but I can work with it. I'll go to my color, pick for white balance, put it on a cloud, and I'm starting to get something. And another thing while I'm thinking about with white balance, the idea is normally you pick something that's neutral. So it's something white, something gray, whatever. So, it could be a tree trunk, it could be a white cloud, it could be the sidewalk or the road. We'll click here. It's a red colored bridge. Didn't seem to change it a lot. What if we do it on the sky? That changed some. Notice the trees got a little brighter. You can do it down here on the water. You can do it on the trees themselves. And that changed it. The color of the sky changed and the trees got whiter. So you can, you know, as you get used to this, you can play with that picker and maybe you'll find something you like, you know, because there's no one size fits all on this as to what's correct. And this white balance tool here has made it a whole lot easier for me. Before, I was playing with sliders, trying to make it less red, more green, all this. And my color pictures I wasn't really happy with. And then once I found this, I started getting pictures that I really liked. So we'll save this one over and open it in GIMP as well. Okay, I've got this opened up, and at first sight, this might not seem that much different than the 720 image that I took with the unconverted camera. Probably if we look at them side by side, I'm sure there'll be some differences, but the main thing is that since this one lets through so much more of the light, my exposure was 1/1000th of a second instead of, I believe the other one was 1/15th. So 1/15th of a second at ISO 400, you just might be wishing you had a tripod. It's usually a good idea. If you're really steady, you might be alright. Plus I'm using a wide angle lens, so that helps too. So I can get away with that some. Then we'll do this same stuff with the curve that I had before. And I'm not going to let the sky go all the way black. If I drag it down enough, it would. And then let's do the color swap as well. Or before, you don't have to swap the colors if you don't want. Let's see what happens if we increase our saturation, and we'll make this all change. So we'll brighten up these colors a whole bunch, make the greens more green, kind of a funny color of green. This leaf up here is almost blue in the upper right hand corner. I guess those trees are kind of a bluish. Another thing we can do, if we go down on colors to this channel mixer again, colors down to components, to channel mixer, you can play with these sliders any amount you want. If you want, say you want to change the color of the trees, make them look a little different. I'm dragging this green to the left here, making it less green. And look at that. My bridge is starting to turn red. So I'm finding little surprises here that I wasn't really expecting in that case. So now I've found a way that I can do, if I want my red bridge to be red and infrared, it is possible. Now what I've done too, I've changed the color of my clouds. They were kind of white, but now since I've been toying with everything, they're got a little different color to them. But there's nothing wrong with that, you know, it's just a matter of what you like. And then I can do my color swap again. So I'll go down here to this components, channel mixer, and I'm going to go to this presets tab. This thing, it has what you used last. So I can click on that. And I believe, yeah, this one here was one I used a little bit ago. So now the blue is all in the red channel, and the red is all in the blue channel, and the green's unchanged. And I've got a bluer sky, and the fact that I've messed around with that green slider has really played with the colors. So, you know, now I've got kind of a rainbow effect of colors in the trees. And my bridge has changed colors some since I swapped them around and put the red in the blue. But that's one thing about, you know, infrared photography. You can just play around with it and do all you want. If you get onto Facebook groups or anything like that, any kind of online group, and look at people's pictures, people just, you know, you kind of set yourself free with what you want to do, and you can make the colors any way you want. You can do whatever you want. So then let's do a 950 nanometer on this camera too, because remember before I was up to 4 seconds. And the one in the camera that didn't cooperate, I think I was up to around 8 seconds with that one. Another thing I needed to mention while I was thinking about it. Since I did this, it affects the light meter in your camera and the autofocus, because they don't see infrared light. Apparently there's actually another sensor in the camera, and it's somewhere up in the viewfinder area. And the idea is when you're looking through the lens and you measure your exposure and measure your autofocus, it uses that different sensor. And it has its own UV infrared blocking filter as well. I did not remove that filter. I'm not sure how to access it or if I even can. But that affects your camera since the lens is covered with the filter. Now with the conversion I'm going to do with that other camera where I said I'm going to put an 850 nanometer filter in there. It's just a little rectangular filter. I'll get a picture of it and show it to you. It'll be over the sensor only. So then that means the sensor, the smaller sensor that is used for autofocus and for the light meter, it's not going to be covered up with infrared light. But my exposure time is very likely it's going to be messed up. My autofocus, when I use with that one there, should be better. So I may have to play with that too, because infrared light does not focus at the exact same distance as light that we can see with our eyes. As a matter of fact, red light, blue light, green light, they all focus at slightly different points on the focus ring of your camera. So that they'll have multiple pieces of glass, multiple elements in your lens to correct that, to try to get all of them to focus at the same point. But anyway, one thing I wanted to show you, I was doing this manual exposure because my auto exposure doesn't work right. So on my particular camera, I can take a picture and then look at the back of the camera, and it's got a little bitty monitor where you can see a preview picture. And I can look at it as long as I'm not in super bright sunlight or something, or usually if I'm standing in the shade and do it. And I can get an idea if I'm way underexposed, way overexposed, or whatever. And that's another reason to use RAW, because then that allows me to play with that exposure when I get it on a computer. So one thing I did here, just for fun, I took a variety of exposure times. Let's see, this is with the converted camera. Let's see, we'll go up here. This one here. Okay, that one there, I think you can't even see anything, but there's actually a little bit of light there. That's at 1,000th of a second. We'll go ahead and open it up in Raw Therapee. So I think there's actually a little bit of yeah, see, there is just a little bit of something there. So some of the pictures that I had taken before and looked at my viewfinder, you know, the little monitor, I would think there was nothing there, and there was a little bit, but you can see it's way underexposed. This thing, it's cranked it up. I can crank it up even more. You get kind of a nighttime picture effect, I guess. But so I took pictures. I did one at 1,000th of a second, and then I did another at a 500th. I think this one was 250. It's down there somewhere. But anyway, I did like 1,000th, a 500th, a 250th, a 125th, a 60th. I kept doubling it, which is like opening up one f-stop. I left it at f8, and I kept doubling the exposure time until I got something that I liked. And sometimes more than one of them is usable, just depending on what effect you want. So that's one thing that's kind of nice about using a digital camera. You can take a whole bunch of pictures. You know, it's not like the old days of film where you spend a bunch of money on a roll of film and you threw away most of it. I can just delete these if I want to. But we'll open up a 950 one here. Okay, this one here was 1/60th of a second. You can do that handheld. You know, you just have to be kind of steady. You can also, of course, you know, if you want to play with your f-stops or something. Which one thing, when you're dealing with infrared, if you do have a camera that has the hotspots, some of them, the hotspots are not all that bad. And if you use your smallest opening, like f16 or f22, it's more likely to have the hotspot be worse. If you go all the way back to wide open, like say f2.0, the hotspot might not be as bad, but then it's harder to get focus. And since infrared doesn't focus exactly the same as visible light, having that depth of field of f8 gives you a wider range of focus than the wide open f2. It helps you get focus. So in this case, I usually use f8. I've done with this camera, I have tried f11 and f16 before in there, and I did not get a hotspot, so I was kind of lucky. This is a camera that I just happened to have, and I did it, and things are working out nice. So let's see, the original picture with the stock camera was 1/4000th of a second, I believe. And this one here, I've got it at a 60th. And when I did it with the unconverted camera, I ended up about 1/15th of a second. So again, I'll do my white balance. And white balance is super easy on these ones that go in black and white. As you can see here, it's pretty easy with the full spectrum camera. This one here is already, it's looking brighter than what it was before, with the other ones being a little underexposed. So I'll go ahead and save this over, and we'll open it up in GIMP and do a quick comparison of the images. Okay, so I've got this opened up in GIMP, and I can still brighten this up. And my clouds and all that, they should be white. You can see my histogram area over here. It's still quite a ways to the left. We'll drag this up to the top to really brighten it. If you take it over too far, you start making, like there, I dragged it over too far. So here, that means some of the data that would not have been solid white is solid white. So you can, I mean, if you want to, you can do it on purpose. If maybe you find a effect you like or whatever, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a matter of being aware of it. So I've got this over where it's not hurting there, and then I'll drag this a little bit down here in the middle. Get the sky to, when I do these, I like the sky to get pretty black. That's kind of unusual, makes it
There you are, you know, it's a bright sunny day, and yet looks kind of like it's nighttime out. So my trees and stuff are turning white. I can always make them more white if I want. I see a lot of people's pictures where they're really, really white. It's just a matter of what you want. I've kind of sacrificed that some in order to get my sky black. I can try to whiten those up more. I'll go to here to colors. You can do this a number of different ways. I'm going to do one where I opened up the shadows and highlights. Let's see here. If I go up to highlights, I think I can brighten them up. Help me do that. I don't see much. It's doing it a little. It's not real obvious. Some things when I do that, it shows up more obvious. We can go to exposure. Let's increase the exposure. Now it's starting to do it. Now I'm dragging it with the slider. I can use my arrows here too and do it in small amounts at a time. So I'm just kind of wanting to give you an idea of what you can do. I try not to have my trees go solid white because I want to be able to see some of the detail in them. And then, you know, if you want, you can leave your sky more gray or whatever, and you notice the water's getting really black. You can still see these weeds that came up to the surface. I like that. I've got one nice thing about the time of day where I was taking this picture. I've got these reflections on the water coming way out here, even though the water's wanting to turn black. So you can get really creative with this. And then also, since this is a full spectrum camera, I'll show you some images here of what happens if you don't have any filter at all, and also colored filters. I've got some very inexpensive color filters that I did. I bought them initially kind of to experiment with, and I really like them. So here's a little quick snapshot I took of a bunch of these filters that I've been using. Of course, these two here you can't see anything out of. These are my infrared filters. One of them is the 950 and the other is the 720. I'm going to take a wild guess and say that might be the 720. Maybe it's playing tricks on my eyes. But then I've got a red color. I've got an orange filter. Yellow. These here, the yellow, red, and orange, are also used fairly commonly in infrared photography. And usually when you buy them, they would be saying that they're at a specific number of nanometers. So I'm going to estimate here. I don't know the exact numbers. Like I say, these are really cheap filters. I think I paid $18 for this 6-pack of these colored filters, and they're just dirt cheap. They're not very good quality filters. They actually work pretty nice for what I want to do, so I keep using them. I've had a lot of fun with them. So the red one, since the end of visible light is around 700, I'm thinking this is, I'll just guess it's 650. I don't know the exact number. So we'll say that's around 650 nanometers. It might be 630, whatever, 660. It's kind of irrelevant to me, but if you go out and buy them, they'll have specific numbers. Orange is usually, I think, around 590 nanometers. Yellow, I think, is around 550, or maybe even 510. You'll see numbers like that. you won't be likely at all to see filters that are designed for infrared to be green or blue, or in this case, this funny looking purple one, which the purple one, to give you an idea, that's called an FLD filter. It's fluorescent to daylight, so that filter, that's like 50-plus-year-old technology. So that was, they just still happened to make them and they threw it in there. What that was for, back in the days when everybody was buying film instead of having digital cameras, normal color film had its white balance to get to correct color to be set for daylight. So the idea was, if you were outside on a bright sunny day with not tons of clouds, then that thing would be balanced. Your color would be real nice. A cloudy day, if it's real cloudy, your colors would get different. They might be a little washed out. And then what really would mess you up, let's say you went indoors, and let's say you were in a brightly lit classroom or office. There's all kinds of overhead fluorescent lights. And it looks perfectly normal in there, and you take a picture, and I believe, if I remember correctly, you're doing this without a flash, your picture would look kind of green. It would have a green cast. And you could use this FLD filter over it, and it would change the fluorescent to be more like daylight, so it would give them better color. And these other filters, I got these colored filters, those were really designed for black and white film. Back in the old days of black and white film, a red filter would be real high contrast that would really make the clouds show up. Orange would also make them show up, but it wouldn't be as contrasty because sometimes the red might seem like it's too much, it's overdone. And yellow would be even more gentle on the amount of contrast, but it would still make it where you could see the clouds. Because back in those days, with black and white film, it was what you called blue sensitive. So the blue sky, as far as that film was concerned, was the same as white. So if you had a blue sky with a couple of puffy white clouds floating around, they wouldn't show up in your picture. Your sky would just look plain white. But if you used one of those filters, you could start to see the clouds because it would separate them from the blue sky background. And then the green and blue and the purple one, basically you'd never see them used. It would flatten it out. I'm sure someone did it, as a special effect because they found something they liked, but it just wasn't common. So anyway, I wanted to show you those, and I've played around with them with that full spectrum camera because it's just a whole new ball game since it lets all that different light in. And I might even get a little bit of ultraviolet light with that blue filter. So this one here is a picture I took with my full spectrum camera with no filter. So basically it's just like a normal camera, except oops, there's no filter inside it to block UV light or infrared light. Now, I've already done this in Raw Therapee, so when it first came out, it looked all kind of reddish. And I did my white balance. I clicked on one of the clouds. Bridge looks nice and red. That seems kind of normal. The blue sky seems kind of normal. But if you start looking at the trees, like, wait a minute. They're all brownish looking. They look almost like they're dead. And, if you want that effect, you could do something weird with this thing with that. But most people don't take pictures full spectrum without a filter. I guess it's considered kind of a taboo or something. I don't know. But, to me, each his own. If you decide you find something you like with it, it's your own business, take the picture. But you can see this is why they put the UV IR cut filter in the camera to begin with. Because that camera was seeing things that our eyes couldn't see. seen colors that our eyes couldn't see. And so the colors would all be wrong. So the manufacturer designs those filters. As a matter of fact, I understand that those filters are slightly different from camera brand to camera brand. They still do the same thing, but like say if you compare a Canon camera and a Nikon camera, one company might be wanting their green grass and green trees to look one kind of shade of green, and the other one company might be thinking different. Maybe they're concentrating on flesh tones, since people usually take people pictures, but there's just a subtle difference with them. And you can, even if you do make your camera full spectrum, you can buy a UV IR cut filter that you just put over the front of your lens, and it will do the same thing to bring it back to normal, but it will not be exactly identical to the filter that was inside your camera to begin with. Because the filter I bought, it was just a generic one, so it wasn't made to Nikon specifications, if you will, as to what they wanted their filter to be. But I didn't take a picture with it on here, but it looks like a pretty typical color picture. It looked quite normal. But if I wanted to be real picky, I could say it didn't look quite the same. So now we'll look at some other color filters that I did with the full spectrum camera, just to show you some of the neat things you get into. Okay, so here we've got, I used a yellow filter. And again, this is with the full spectrum camera. I wouldn't get, if I used a yellow filter over the normal camera, you wouldn't get this effect like this. It would change your color balance a little bit, but it wouldn't do like what I've done, because the trees, look at this, they're no longer green, and I haven't white balanced it yet. My sky looks kind of yellowish looking. So we'll do the white balance. Click on that, click the pick tool, and wow, that was something I definitely didn't expect. I ended up with a green sky, purple trees, and my red bridge stayed red. So if you like that effect, hey, look at there, that's interesting. You can get that right out of the box, so to speak. And then I'll save it and see what happens if I swap the colors in GIMP. Okay, so I've got this opened in GIMP, and my exposure too, I think it was 1,000th of a second. So you can have really short shutter speeds too, it can be really quick. And we'll go ahead and I will bring up our curve first. See, this is a little more normal, but if I want, I can brighten this up in case it doesn't look quite right when I look at this in a bright room. And we'll tweak that a little bit. And that's kind of an interesting picture. So then, what happens if we swap our red and our blue? You can even swap the green too. Let's see, because you don't usually get that, but the red and blue is what's common swap. Let's go back here. Wow, so if I swap red and blue, I get kind of a yellow-green sky. The bridge turns purple. The trees and stuff are kind of pinky color. What happens if I want to get the green out of the sky? I drag the green down to 0. And something like that. That's not me, but see, I'm kind of experimenting here. You can get a whole bunch of stuff, and I just kind of messed it up there. But if I swap the green out, you know, I can get a different color of sky. If I put the green into blue, that should do it, shouldn't it? If I put the green into the blue, there we go. All I did was I dragged the green up into the blue, and I'll drag the blue down, and then we can drag the green and green down, and we can get the sky to turn kind of blue. I'm grabbing the right one, and you can see it changes the color of everything, and even the trees almost start to look green again. They get kind of yellow-green. So you can play around with your sliders and get all kinds of different effects. So that was with the yellow filter. So now let's take a look at what the orange filter does. Okay, so we've got our orange filter. This ended up being the one that here for a while lately I've been having the most fun with, as far as being full spectrum and not going up into infrared, even though there is infrared light coming through. That's one thing I learned. I didn't think there was initially, but somebody pointed out to me, yes, there is. Over there we selected our cloud on a white balance. The trees got bright blue, and this is still a dark picture. This is at 1/4000th of a second. I will save it, and we'll open it up in GIMP. Okay, so then of course I'll brighten it up a little bit. You see my graph there, the histogram, the image there, it's all way over on the left. Okay. Play with that. Try to darken some of the, trying to see if I can get a little of that red to come back in. Sometimes it gets it on that bridge. We'll click OK. What happens if we swap our colors? Down to components, channel mixer. Go back a couple of them there. There we go. I got kind of a, but now I got my trees to look kind of yellow, and you can even get them to be a little orange. My sky, you can see it's a little bit on the green side. I think I can correct that some. Helps, you know, sometimes you have to be patient and really play with it slow. I'm doing this kind of quick. I'm reducing the amount of green a little bit. And see there, my sky is starting to get blue. So I haven't completely wiped it out. And of course, as I do, my cloud color is changing. But my sky has got kind of blue. All my trees are kind of looking like a fall color orange. The sky got kind of blue. It's the reflections off the water there. The sky has got kind of blue. So the orange filter, I've had a lot of fun with that. I've found out, you know, I like the fact that I could see through the lens. I could do the autofocus. I still, you know, manually did my exposure. You can actually, with this here, I can do my exposure because it's not being blocked by that infrared filter, but it doesn't give you the correct exposure. It'll, I think it overexposed it. It tricks it. But anyway, that messes with that. So I still, if you happen to get yours professionally done, which can be pretty pricey, you know, you might spend several $100s to get it converted. But if you got an expensive camera, you don't want to do what I did, unless you're really good at doing that kind of stuff. That's taking quite a bit of risk. Because, you know, they've got clean rooms and stuff. I just did this in my house. So, you know, I'm dealing with the risk of dust and all that. And if you get it professionally done, if you got a real pricey camera, I'm sure it's worth it. So there's orange. And we'll go back to some more here to yellow. Or no, I'm sorry, to red. Okay, so now I've got my red filter up here, and at first glance it might not seem that much different than what the orange one was. See, I've got a lot of red light coming through there. The green and blue, it is getting some. So we'll white balance it. And when you're doing these full spectrum ones where you start getting a lot of color, if you go changing your, what you choose as your white balance, like there I've got it on the cloud. Now we'll do the trees. The trees, as you can see, in this case, got a lot less color in them. We can do it on the sky. The trees completely changed, clouds changed. Sometimes you get a really radical effect, just depending on the lighting and all that. Usually, if I've got clouds in my picture, that's what I try, and then I'll, you know, toy with it a little bit. And then we can get some interesting effects with this one too. We'll open it up in GIMP. So here we are with our red filter. And bring up my curve. Brighten this up. Ease up a little in the middle. I believe this one here is the one. One of these I darkened up the shadows. Let's see if I have to really, this one here doesn't want to, even with a red filter, my red bridge doesn't want to be red. I can get it to do it. It did it with some of the others. I don't, like the yellow when we saw it. As you can see, you get completely different setup there. Your color of green's different. My sky color is a bit different. Let's swap this out. See what happens if we swap our red and blue colors. But you can get, let's see, quite a bit different effect with each filter. That's kind of wild looking. I wasn't expecting that. There's a little bit of a reddish orange sky. It may not have swapped exactly the way I thought it did. Okay, this is what I was expecting. I processed this one a few days ago. So I don't know, I did something stupid to that one I just opened and missed it. That I'd had it saved here earlier. And I swapped the red and blue. And then I got the trees to turn yellow instead of quite as orange. And with the orange filter, a lot of times they get kind of orangey colored. But anyways, I got that effect. So then we'll go to another filter. What about that real weird purple filter, that fluorescent to daylight one? Everybody knows that's not made for doing this stuff. But something happened. Let's see if we can get it. So when I did that one, I'll get my picture back in the center. Hang on. Okay, so that's better position. So as you can see, it gave me, when I white balanced it, kind of a blue sky, and it changed the color of the trees again. And if I was to get in there and brighten them up, I'd get kind of a yellow-orange color of some sort. So then let's look at my blue filter. So this one wasn't too much different than the purple filter, but it's a little bit different. So it gave me the blue sky, kind of blue-green. And what if we white balance on the blue sky? The sky kind of turns almost gray color. We white balance on the trees. They get a little more neutral. Look at that, how blue your blue sky is. and how that's kind of a weird effect. The trees look almost dead again like before with the no filter at all. That you've got kind of an ultra blue sky and a reflection of blue off the water. So, you know, that could be, if you're looking for a certain effect, that's something you can do with the full spectrum camera. You wouldn't be able to get that out of using the stock camera, likely. Maybe even software you might if you're really good with it. One thing too, I was wondered, the blue, since it's way over near the ultraviolet, it's possible that I'm getting a little bit of ultraviolet light in this picture too. Okay, this filter is called like a ZWB3, and I've got this, I just stumbled into it. I was on AliExpress, and it was a real inexpensive filter for $5 or $6, and it says it passes ultraviolet light, but when I look at the curve, it also passed infrared. So what this one basically did was it blocked almost all the light that we can see with our eyes. I could kind of see through the filter, but then it passes ultraviolet light and it passes infrared light. And apparently there's a lot more infrared light coming from the sunlight than there is ultraviolet. So the infrared part of it tends to get overexposed before I can actually see the ultraviolet. So we'll white balance this. Find a cloud. We can have a strange green effect on the trees, real yellow green. The bridge turned green, that's unusual. A white balance on the bridge, that's weird. The trees turned white, so maybe there's a bunch of infrared light going off of them. Okay, so this looks really strange, and before I knew how to color balance with that, I remember playing with one of them and ended up getting a picture I kind of liked, but it was real strange. So what happens is usually the infrared gets overexposed in order to show any ultraviolet. If we go to my color swapper, we swap the red and blue, it turns everything almost blue. We can desaturate it. Let's say it's too blue. Let's just try to tone that down. You can get a little different. You know, you can start to turn the trees white and all that. If you play with it, like I say, this is just an odd filter. But I would generally recommend going with the standard filters that they use for infrared photography. So here we have one with the green filter on my full spectrum camera, and seems odd that you'd have these colors with a green filter, but I haven't white balanced it yet, so that's why. So I'll go pick, I'll try to pick a cloud. These trees kind of go opposite, don't they? They're almost pink or magenta. Pick the sky. Makes the sky a little more gray and the trees pop out a little more. As the bridge is red. Choose the bridge. That's funny. Choose the bridge, get a green sky. Use the water here. Goes back where we were. So you can play around with this one too here. And this one here is at 1,000th of a second. It's a little brighter than some of the others. Of course, the green, it's kind of surprising in a way what it did, because it's kind of in the middle as far as your color spectrum, with your blue over by ultraviolet and your green in the middle, and then the red way out by infrared. But let a little something in. Looks like the red's kind of spread out quite a bit on that histogram up here. It's goes to blue a little bit. Anywho, that's what happens when you use a green filter on here. But we can always put it in GIMP and swap the colors, see what happens. I played around with this for a couple of minutes while I was paused because I didn't know what I was doing really. And let's see, I left the red, normal in the red, and I put the green, actually doubled it up in the blue, so it says 2.0, to try to get the sky to look blue because the sky was green. And then I have the blue and the green, and I backed it off some, kind of helped make the sky more blue, and the trees look a little different. The reds feel kind of red. Anyway, you can see if you play around with them, you can get something, and it might be different with each picture, you know, all depending on your lighting and stuff. So anyway, hopefully this helps to give you an idea of what you're getting into if you try to do this. You know, if you want to simply just buy a filter and throw it over your camera lens, that's certainly possible. Just be prepared to use a tripod. If you want, you can pick one specific color or wavelength that you like if you like 720 to get some something similar to this, you can get them to turn white depending on your exposure. 720 is a good one to get a blue sky when you swap them out, when you swap your red and blue. If you go up to 850 or 950, you're basically going black and white. If you go backwards to like 590 or something like that, something below 700, now you can see through. Of course, well, actually, I should rephrase that, because if you actually convert the camera itself to that wavelength, then it's not on your in front of your lens, so then you can see through your camera lens. It's just, you know, so it'll be the camera will be dealing with it. Like with mine, that full spectrum camera, if I'm using one of my infrared filters, since I can't see through the viewfinder, I've got a couple options. One, do like what I did here, where I put it on a tripod, framed my picture the way I liked it, then I put my filter on. And I also had to be cautious about my focus. In this case, I auto-focused without a filter, which is basically to infinity. And then I got on my camera lens and clicked from auto-focus to manual without actually moving it, so it stayed, the focus on the lens stayed in the correct spot for me. I kind of tricked it. Then I put my filter on. A lot of times I was using, when I first started doing this, I was using a completely manual lens. I was using a lens that was like 50 years old, possibly. It was a real old film camera lens, which meant that the camera couldn't see what was going on with it because it didn't have the computer stuff. So I had to manual focus. I had to manually set my exposure, which I was expecting to anyway. And what I liked about it, it had a little red dot on the lens barrel. So when I would focus to infinity, I would move it from the infinity line just like a 1/16 of an inch, if that, over to this red dot, and that was where infrared was focused to infinity. But then I learned that dust particles that get on the sensor, with my camera at least, if I'm using the lenses that came with that camera, which was just a basic kit lens, as they call them, like if you bought a the DSLR, and it included a lens with it, just a standard lens. Then it has the computer stuff on it, and you could actually take a dust reference photo. What you'd do then, you'd take a picture, it would tell you in the instructions, you'd take a picture of a solid white area, and then it would calibrate it, and any little spots of dust that were on there, it could remove them for you automatically. And I also found out when I converted that camera to full spectrum to begin with, all I did was remove that internal filter, and then I left it uncovered, and what happened was when dust got on it, the dust particle was actually closer to the sensor than if I had had the clear filter over it, so the dust showed up even worse. So I ended up buying a clear filter to put on it internally, and that helped with the dust. And then also using the modern lens that came with the camera helped me. So I switched to that, and that's one of the things I liked about that orange filter. When I used that, all of a sudden, not only could I see through the lens, before I would actually look over the top of the camera and estimate where I was pointing, and I got pretty good at it with a little bit of practice. So I was actually getting pretty decent pictures because I was using a wide angle anyway. And, I just kind of taught myself how to point the camera. So that made it nice. But then when I had the orange filter over that, all of a sudden I could see through it, which made it easier, so it was faster. And I could use my autofocus. And then I still had the manual expose, but that was okay. So I think that pretty well covers the basics of this. I'll put a little slideshow, I guess, of some of the pictures I've taken, just to kind of show you what you can do. And hopefully this video helps you out and helps you decide what you might want to do if you're going to get into infrared photography.